Listen closely. That's the sound of the last song Keren Rowland ever heard. February 12th, 1971, 8:04 p.m. A biting winter night in rural Vermont. 20-year-old Keren, laughing, always laughing, zips up her favorite red peacoat, the one her little brother teased her for wearing like a superhero cape. She's running late. A friend's birthday party, just 15 minutes down Birchwood Road. "Don't wait up," she shouts to her roommate, her breath visible in the frozen air. The door slams. For 900 steps, everything is ordinary. Crunching gravel under boots. The faint smell of wood smoke. A flickering porch light in the distance. Then nothing. No scream. No struggle. Just silence thicker than the snow piling up on the empty road. By midnight, her roommate starts calling friends. By dawn, her mother is screaming into a sheriff's phone. And by spring, they'll find her remains scattered in a pine grove so dense, the sun barely touched the ground. But here's what chills me. Keren didn't vanish into thin air. Someone erased her. A girl who lit up every room she walked into, reduced to a name on a rotting missing poster. A case buried under 50 years of dust, rumors, and lies. Until today. Let's get one thing straight. Keren Rowland was not a cautionary tale. She was a force of nature trapped in a town too small to hold her. Picture this. A 5 feet 2 inches brunette with a laugh so loud, old Mrs. Wilkins across the street would shout, "Pipe down, Keren," every Friday night. She waitressed at Benny's diner, slinging pancakes and sarcasm in equal measure. Regulars called her Sparky, not just for her sharp wit, but because she'd sneak free milkshakes to broke college kids. Her dream? To buy Benny's when he retired and rename it Crazy Good Eats. She scribbled menu ideas on napkins. Mom's meatloaf, 75 cents, no celery ever. And tucked Elvis's suspicious minds into the jukebox so often, Benny threatened to break the record. But beneath the sunshine, there was steel. Keren saved every tip in a coffee tin under her bed. New York City, 1973, she'd tell her brother, winking. Skyscrapers and proper bagels, Danny. No more frozen cornfields. But ambition is dangerous in places where women are meant to stay quiet. By 1971, the whispers started. "Who does she think she is?" hissed the church ladies. "Running off to the city? Probably pregnant," lied a jealous ex. Even the sheriff dismissed her plans as a phase. But Keren kept saving those nickels, kept writing Danny letters with doodles of the Statue of Liberty, holding a spatula. Until February 12th, the night someone made sure Keren Rowland's dreams ended in those same frozen cornfields. Let's walk the path Keren Rowland almost survived. 8:07 p.m. The temperature, -3 degrees Celsius. Her breath hangs in the air like ghostly punctuation as she steps onto Birchwood Road. That red peacoat, her mother's last gift, glows like a beacon against the snow. "You'll never lose her in a crowd," her mom joked. But tonight there's no crowd. Just a narrow dirt road swallowed by pines, their branches sagging under the weight of winter. Every 30 seconds, her boots crunch fresh snow. Crunch, crunch, crunch. Then, at the 743rd step, the rhythm breaks. 2 truckers hauling lumber to Canada swear they saw her. A red blur arguing with some guy in a leather jacket, claimed the first. "Looked like he grabbed her arm," said the other. But here's the problem. Their rigs were logged 22 miles apart that night. Impossible. By the time detectives connected the dots, one driver moved to Alaska. The other died in a bar fight, taking his memory problems to the grave. But the road tells another story. Keren's scarf, polka-dotted, hand-knitted by Danny, was found snagged on a branch 10 feet off the ground, as if she'd been lifted. And those pine trees? They've been whispering for 50 years. Someone dragged her into those woods. Someone who knew the snow would bury tire tracks, the cold would preserve lies, and a small town would choose silence over justice. Imagine a town holding its breath. For 93 days, the people of Hollow Brook, Vermont, turned their world upside down looking for Keren Rowland. They didn't just search, they raged. Farmers abandoned their plows. School kids skipped class to staple missing posters to every telephone pole, diner window, and church bulletin board. Those posters are seared into my mind. Keren's grin, slightly crooked from a childhood sledding accident, her eyes crinkled mid-laugh. "Last seen on Birchwood Road," the bold letters screamed. But beneath the panic, there was something darker festering. A question no one dared ask aloud. Was she taken, or did she run? The first week was all sweat and hope. Search parties fanned out at dawn, armed with thermoses of bitter coffee and borrowed bloodhounds. They carved through the woods like soldiers, hacking at thorny underbrush with machetes, shouting her name until their throats bled. Teenagers on horseback combed the riverbanks, their boots sinking into icy mud. Old Mr. Henley, the town's reclusive war vet, even dredged his fishing pond with a rusted net. Just in case, he muttered, though everyone knew he hadn't left his porch in years. By week 2, desperation curdled into spectacle. Mediums rolled into town, their cars trailing incense smoke and bad credit. Madame Zelda, a self-proclaimed spirit whisperer from Albany, held a séance in Benny's diner at midnight. Regulars held hands over cold coffee as she channeled a male spirit in leather, until Benny kicked her out for stealing bacon. The local dive bar, the Rusty Nail, offered free whiskey to anyone with a tip. Drunks slurred stories about shadowy figures and UFOs, while the bartender tallied lies on a napkin. Then came the threats. Keren's mother, Margaret, papered the sheriff's desk with handwritten pleas. "You're not trying hard enough," until he threatened to arrest her for hysteria. Her brother Danny, just 14, pedaled his bike to neighboring towns, stuffing mailboxes with flyers. One night, he came home to a shattered bedroom window and a note. "Stop digging. No fingerprints, no suspects, just a town learning how to swallow its secrets." And then, the snow melted. On May 3rd, 1971, a German shepherd named Duke trotted up to his owner's porch with a femur clamped in his jaws. The man, a mechanic named Frank, initially laughed. "Duke's into deer bones now," until he spotted the jagged fracture. Human. The woods surrendered Keren's remains piece by piece. A ribcage nestled in rotted leaves, a skull fragment wedged between tree roots, her red peacoat collar snagged on a barbed wire fence. Dental records confirmed it, but the truth was in the details. Her body lay barely a mile from her apartment, in a patch of forest so trampled by searchers, they'd kicked her own boot prints into the mud. Let me repeat that they walked right past her. For months. The coroner's report was a masterclass in evasion. Cause of death, undetermined. No bullets, no knife marks, just bones bleached by spring rains. But here's what they didn't say. A single molar was missing, pried out post-mortem. Her wrists bore grooves consistent with rope burns, but the fibers had disintegrated. And that red coat? The one bright enough to spot in a snowstorm? It was folded neatly beneath her body, as if someone wanted it found. The town split like rotten firewood. Half blamed a psychopath passing through. The other half pointed at Margaret, whispering a mother knows. Conspiracy theories bloomed. Keren faked her death. Keren was a CIA informant. The sheriff buried the case file in a cabinet labeled miscellaneous and spent his evenings at the Rusty Nail, drowning in bourbon and side eyes. But the loudest voices were the silent ones. The diner regular who stopped ordering milkshakes. The trucker who quit his route overnight. The pastor who preached a sermon on forgiveness the day after Keren's funeral. And Danny, now 64, still replays those 93 days in his head. "I should have checked the trees," he says. "I should have looked up. Because here's the thing about searching. It forces you to see what you've ignored. Those woods weren't empty. They were full. Of hunters who saw nothing. Of neighbors who heard no screams. Of a killer who watched the town tear itself apart and smiled. The truth is out there, rotting under decades of fallen leaves. But in Hollow Brook, some secrets are buried with more than just dirt. Let's play a game. Let's pretend we're detectives in 1971, shuffling through lies thicker than the case file. Let's dissect the theories, the rumors, the what-ifs that turned Keren Rowland's murder into a hall of mirrors. But be warned, every answer here only leads to darker questions. Theory number 1. The drifter's sharp, percussive ticking. A clock? A Geiger counter? Pulses beneath the narration. The police's favorite suspect, a nameless hitchhiker. A transient with grease-stained jeans and a southern drawl, last seen buying matches at the gas station. They called him Railcar Roy. A ghost who hopped freight trains and, according to the sheriff, had the eyes of a killer. For weeks, Hollow Brook fixated on him. Parents locked their doors. The diner posted a "No Trespassers" sign. But here's the problem. Roy had an alibi. A bulletproof one. On February 12th, he was in a jail cell 200 miles away, arrested for stealing a ham sandwich. The cops knew this. They knew, but they leaked his name to the press anyway. Why? Because Hollow Brook needed a villain. Someone to hate. Someone not from here. Roy died in 1989, penniless and paranoid, screaming about the girl in the red coat to anyone who'd listen. Was it guilt? Or had the real killer weaponized him as a decoy? Then there's the other drifter. The one nobody talks about. 3 days after Keren vanished, a trucker named Eddie Voss swore he picked up a man near Birchwood Road. Shaken like a leaf, covered in mud, reeked of bleach. The man offered Eddie $50 to drive him to the Canadian border. When Eddie refused, the man hissed, "You'll regret this." The next morning, Eddie's truck was torched. Police called it vandalism. Eddie called it a warning. But without a name, without a face, the drifter theory dissolves. Just another shadow in Hollow Brook's forest of lies. Theory number 2. The boyfriend, a record needle scratches. A warped snippet of Elvis's Suspicious Minds plays before cutting to silence. Meet Tom Riley, Keren's on-again, off-again boyfriend. The golden boy with a slick comb-over and a '67 Mustang he'd raced down Birchwood Road to blow off steam. The cops loved him, son of a decorated Marine, altar boy, star shortstop. But Tom had a temper. Keren's diary, never entered into evidence, detailed a fight where he smashed her Elvis record after she mentioned New York. On the night she vanished, Tom claimed he was at a poker game with 4 buddies. "Won $20, lost my watch, home by 11, he told police. But his alibi stank of rehearsal, buddy number 1. Tom was with us all night, drank 6 beers, puked in the sink, buddy number 2. He left at 9:30 for cigarettes. Back in 10 minutes, buddy number 3. I don't remember. The timeline? A mess. The sheriff? Uninterested. But here's the kicker. In 1998, a deathbed confession from one of the poker buddies revealed Tom left for an hour that night. Made us swear to cover. Why? He said it was a surprise for Keren. Tom died in 2003, taking his secrets to a grave adorned with a baseball trophy. But Keren's brother Danny keeps a different relic. A crumpled love letter Tom wrote her, found stuffed in a library book. The last line, "If I can't have you, no one will." Theory number 3. The farmhouse, dissonant choir hums a hymn, a dirge, growing louder. Now we descend into the town's rotten core. 5 miles north of Birchwood Road sits the old Hadley farm, a crumbling Victorian mansion where, locals whisper, troublesome girls were taken to learn manners. The Hadleys, a wealthy family with ties to judges, sheriffs, and import-export businesses, denied everything. But in 1971, whispers became screams. 2 weeks before Keren vanished, a waitress named Linda Jeffries quit Benny's diner and fled town. Her parting words to Keren? "They watch us. Don't walk alone at night." Linda's now 73, living under a new name in Oregon. When tracked down in 2012, she muttered, "The Hadleys had a basement. Ask the pastor." The pastor, though, died in 1985. His diary? Burned. Then there's the red thread, literally. Strands of crimson wool, matching Keren's scarf, were found snagged on the farmhouse gate in 1971. The sheriff dismissed it. Deer rub against posts all the time, but a retired foreman recently came forward. "The Hadleys paid me to tear out the basement floor 2 days after Keren went missing. Concrete was still wet. No bodies. No proof. Just a mansion rotting into the earth. Its secrets buried under decades of poison ivy and plausible deniability." Theory number 4. The cover-up, a typewriter clatters erratically, then stops mid-sentence. Let's talk about the real monster, apathy. The sheriff's department lost evidence. Witnesses vanished. Files accidentally shredded. Even Keren's diary, which friends swear mentioned a man following her, was never logged. Why? Because Hollow Brook's power brokers couldn't stomach a scandal. In 2005, a retired deputy drunkenly admitted, "We got a call that night from someone high up. Told us to stand down until morning. By dawn, the snow had erased Keren's trail. But the most damning clue? The coroner's signature. Dr. Eli Bronson signed Keren's autopsy report 3 days before her body was found. When confronted in 1982, he claimed it was a clerical error. 2 months later, he retired to a lakeside mansion, funded by the Hadley family. Theory number 5, the truth, a child's music box winds up, playing a haunting off-key rendition of You Are My Sunshine. Here's what I believe. Keren Rowland was killed because she dared to want more. More than a dying town, more than a jealous boyfriend, more than a society that treats ambitious women as threats. Her death wasn't random. It was a message. The killer? Someone who knew Birchwood Road's blind spots. Someone who knew the snow would erase their tracks, the town would blame outsiders, and the police would shrug. Someone who still lives here, sipping coffee at Benny's diner, smiling at Keren's faded poster on the wall. But Danny Rowland has a theory too. Every year, on the anniversary of her disappearance, he drives to Birchwood Road and screams her name into the pines. And sometimes the wind screams back. Let's cut through the bullshit. Keren Rowland's case didn't go cold because of bad luck. It was murdered. Murdered by indifference, incompetence, and a sheriff's department that treated her like a nuisance instead of a human being. This isn't a whodunit, it's a who didn't care. And the answer will make your blood run colder than the Vermont winter that buried her. The forensics fiasco, a jar of rain sloshes faintly in the background, crescendoing with thunder. February 13th, 1971. Dawn breaks over Birchwood Road. The snow's stopped, but the rain begins, a relentless, icy downpour that would have washed away a bloodstain in minutes. By the time deputies arrived at 11 a.m., Keren's boot prints were soup. Her scarf? A sopping rag clinging to a branch. And the one potential witness, a neighbor who heard a car door slam around 8:30 p.m., was told to call back tomorrow by a dispatcher too busy watching the dating game to take notes. But here's the kicker. Even if they'd tried, 1971 forensics couldn't have saved this case. DNA testing? A sci-fi fantasy. Fingerprint dusting? Useless in the rain. The coroner collected her remains in grocery sacks because evidence bags ran out last month. And that red peacoat, folded neatly under her body? They stored it in a moldy evidence locker beside a half-eaten tuna sandwich. By May, the coat reeked so badly, a janitor tossed it into an incinerator. The sheriff shrugged. "We're not the FBI," he told Keren's mother. But here's what he didn't say. That same week, his department spent $5,000, half their annual budget, on a state-of-the-art radar to catch bootleggers smuggling whiskey across the Canadian border. Priorities, right? The Witness Whisper campaign, a rotary phone rings once, then goes dead. Witnesses didn't just move away. They were erased. Take Eddie Voss, the trucker who reported the bleach-smelling hitchhiker. 2 days after talking to police, his rig malfunctioned on a steep mountain pass. Brakes failed. Eddie survived, but his logbook, detailing every stop he made the week Keren vanished, burned to ash. Coincidence? His wife didn't think so. She packed their bags that night and vanished into witness protection. Except there was no protection. Just a don't ask questions note slipped under their motel door. Then there's Linda Jeffries, the waitress who warned Keren about the Hadley farm. 3 months after the murder, Linda's landlord found her apartment stripped bare. Clothes in the closet, food in the fridge, but every photo, diary, and letter gone. Even the address labels on her mail were peeled off. The sheriff called it a prank. Linda called it a death sentence. But the most damning silence? The poker buddies. Tom Riley's alibi crew, 4 upstanding men. All left town by 1975. One joined a monastery. Another died in a hunting accident. The third changed his name twice, and now lives off-grid in Montana. The fourth? He's the reason we know about the deputy's confession. The deathbed confession that nobody wanted, labored breathing fades in a raspy metallic gasp. Deputy Royce Miller died on October 31st, 1998. Lung cancer, they said. But in his final hours, high on morphine and regret, he confessed to a nurse. We buried her file. Sheriff's orders. That girl was going to blow the lid off everything. Here's what Royce claimed. The call. At 9 p.m. on February 12th, the sheriff received a call from a VIP ordering him to delay the search until morning. The bribe, $10,000 cash, delivered in a brown paper bag to the station's back door. The cover-up, Keren's file was stamped closed, runaway, before her body was even found. The nurse wrote it all down. She even smuggled out a tape recorder. But when she took it to the state police, they laughed. Royce was a drunk, a bitter old man, they said. The tape? Lost. The nurse? Fired 2 weeks later for stealing hospital supplies. But here's the kicker. Royce's confession matches a detail only the killer would know. Keren's left molar, the one missing from her skull, was found in 2001 by a hiker near the Hadley farm. The tooth had been drilled with a tiny hole, like it had been worn on a necklace. Royce's final words? He kept trophies. The bureaucratic black hole, a shredder roars, then chokes on paper. By 1973, Keren's case file was thinner than a diner menu. Missing. The 8 p.m. gas station receipt showing she bought gum. The Polaroid of Tom Riley's alibi poker game. Turned out the photo was dated 1970. The coroner's original report, which allegedly noted ligature marks on the ribs. What remained? A half-page memo. Case hashtag 71-022, Rowland K., deceased. No suspects. Recommend storage. They filed it between a 1968 jaywalking ticket and a citation for public indecency, a farmer urinating behind his barn. But here's the twist. In 2015, a janitor found a moldy box labeled Zmaz Decorations in the station's basement. Inside, Keren's case file, or what was left of it, pages stuck together with rat droppings. A smear of dried ketchup over Tom Riley's name, and a single sentence scribbled in the margin. Hadley paid. Keep quiet. The sheriff's response? Cold cases stay cold for a reason. The legacy of lies, a wind chime tinkles, the same one that hung on Keren's porch. Today, Hollowbrooks Police Station has a brand new crime lab. DNA drones, facial recognition. But Keren's case? Still under review. They'll tell you forensics have come a long way since 1971. What they won't say, those advances don't matter when evidence is ash, when witnesses are dead, when the people in charge would rather protect a killer than admit they failed a 20-year-old girl who just wanted to eat bagels in New York. But the truth has a way of clawing back. In 2020, Danny Rowland petitioned to exhume Keren's remains. The new coroner found something the old one missed. A sliver of blue polyester fiber embedded in her rib, matching the uniforms worn by Hadley farm workers in 1971. The sheriff's response? Contaminated sample. Danny's response? He planted sunflowers on Keren's grave. Because unlike this town, they turned toward the light. Keren Rowland would have turned 73 this year. She'd hate celery just as much. Her diner would have had the best apple pie in Vermont, and every Friday night, she'd still play Elvis on the jukebox, loud enough to make the church ladies groan. Instead, all that's left is a cracked headstone in Hollowbrook Cemetery. The dates are wrong. Her brother Danny paid to carve February 12th, 1971 twice. She died the day she disappeared, he says. The rest is just paperwork. But walk through town today and you'll feel it, the weight of a secret too heavy to bury. Old men at Benny's diner still side-eye the missing poster yellowing on the wall. The Hadley farm creaks in the wind, its boarded-up windows like closed eyes. And at night, when the pines sway, some say it sounds like whispering. Help me, look up. Why didn't you stop him? Maybe it's the wind. Maybe it's guilt. Or maybe Keren's still out there, trapped in the cold, waiting for someone to say her name out loud. Not as a victim, not as a headline, but as the girl who laughed too loud, loved too hard, and dared to dream of something bigger than a town that wanted her small. Danny still writes her letters. Every week, same time. He folds them into paper airplanes and launches them into the woods off Birchwood Road. Maybe she'll catch one, he says. The truth is, he's not writing to Keren. He's writing to the monster who took her. And one day, when the wind shifts, those words will land on the right porch, on the right conscience. So listen to those pines. Listen close. Pause. The piano fades. A single breath echoes. If you know anything, a name, a rumor, a lie your grandpa told on his deathbed, pick up the phone. Call the sheriff. Call Danny. Or slip a note under the door of Benny's diner at midnight. Someone's still listening. Her brother's mailbox is at the end of Cedar Street. The red one. It's always red. Her case file may be gathering dust, but her red coat still burns in the dark. And some secrets are too heavy for the grave.